might not seem like it these days, but there was a time when Castlevania was one of the most recognizable franchises in gaming. Before they decided to stop making video games and focus on gambling, Konami was putting out hit after hit after hit for the NES and SNES. I'd go as far as saying Konami and Castlevania were as important to those systems as Capcom and Mega Man were. So when the Nintendo 64 came and so many of the other Nintendo platform mainstays were making the jump into 3D, it was only a matter of time before Castlevania took a crack at it. Castlevania made its way onto the Nintendo 64 right at the start of 1999. Everyone calls this game Castlevania 64, but it's sort of a Sonic 06 situation, in more ways than one if you believe all the hate this game gets online. You can find this game at the top of some worst transitions from 2D to 3D lists, and some people will even cite it among the worst games on the N64 as a whole. I sort of have a thing for bad games, so I scooped up a copy of this game for something like $10 a few years back. Seems like I got ripped off though, because this game is nowhere near as bad as the internet might think. Every 100 years, Dracula rises again and brings with him his entire castle. The Castlevania, if you will. Unfortunately for him, he has some of the most dedicated haters in all of fiction. Each member of the Belmont bloodline passes down not only their grudge against Dracula, but also a magical whip fittingly named the Vampire Killer. The first of this game's two playable characters is Reinhardt Schneider, the latest in the Belmont's line of succession. I guess we can assume he married out of the Belmont name at some point. Like his ancestors from the 2D games, Reinhardt is here to platform and whip-crack his way through the castle on his way to ruin Dracula's day. Reinhardt's movement is pretty basic, but it still felt kind of awkward to me. Instead of being able to jump in any direction from a standstill, the direction you hold while jumping determines the type of jump that you get. Keeping the stick neutral, or holding the direction Reinhardt is facing behaves the way you'd expect, but holding left, right, or back results in a sort of Zelda-style combat hop in that direction. You don't have a ton of control over your character once they're in the air, so you're incentivized to use that forward jump to get your momentum, but if you input the direction and jump too quickly, you can just wind up side-hopping to your death. This game also puts a huge emphasis on grabbing ledges and pulling yourself up. This often makes the platforming feel slow and methodical, which definitely isn't for everyone. There's a learning curve here, but once you get a handle on this game's slightly janky feel, it really isn't so bad. The ledge grabs are pretty forgiving, and the game doesn't ask much in the way of precision platforming. If you do fall though, it's usually game over, either from fall damage or from one of this game's plentiful instant death pits. In combat, Reinhardt wields both the Vampire Killer and a short sword that doesn't get a cool name. You can lock onto enemies with R, though you can't move around while locked on. Those combat hops I mentioned earlier also don't really do their jobs all that well. They feel pretty stiff and don't go quite far enough to dodge most attacks. Luckily, the lock-on as a whole felt pretty optional and I barely used it. This game has some pretty aggressive aim assist on the whip, so as long as you're vaguely facing your target, you're probably gonna land the hit. The sword functions as a close-range melee attack, but does less damage than the whip, which can also hit things in close range. You could probably go this entire game forgetting the sword was even there. No wonder they didn't bother giving it a name. But hey, maybe melee combat's just not your thing. If that's the case, you'd probably prefer this game's second playable character, Carrie Fernandez. She's smaller and a little bit more nimble than Reinhardt, but overall control's about the same. In combat, Carrie opts for a ranged magic attack instead of the whip. She can charge up her shot or just fire it raw, and either way it has some super generous homing to it. Honestly, you can sort of just run around and fire charge shots and they'll do most of the work for you. She's also carrying 2 chakrams with her for a melee attack, but I don't think I used these things once in my entire playthrough with her. Overall, I found the combat to be a lot easier than the platforming. Taking hits feels like no big deal with how many healing items the game throws your way, and if you grab a power-up or two, you're two-shotting most of the enemies. You can spice things up with series staple sub-weapons like the axe or the cross, but you'll probably wind up holding on to the holy water like I did. As long as you stay mobile, nothing's really as dangerous as it looks. If you want, you can really just run past most of these guys. As you make your way through the castle, the plot actually diverges a bit based on the character you're playing as. Both Carrie and Reinhardt are here to put Dracula down, but the lead up to that is changed by who you meet along the way. There's 2 very different stories here, of which I think Carrie's felt a little bit stronger to me. Reinhardt's just here to carry on the family business, but Carrie seems to have a much more personal stake in this. These diverging stories also result in both of the characters having unique areas of the castle that only they get to visit. Again, I think I liked Carrie's unique levels more, even if it was mostly for the visuals. If you're only gonna give this game one playthrough, Carrie's probably the way to go. She really carries the game. After hearing about this game's reputation, I had some pretty low expectations going in. Really though, I found myself pleasantly surprised plenty of times during my playthroughs. Castlevania is a series steeped in horror charm, and this game actually delivers on that horror in a few spots. The were-tiger enemy grabbing Carrie by the leg genuinely spooked me, and the maze section was really tense without spoiling too much. There's a day-night cycle, and the game actually tracks how many in-game days you've spent exploring the castle, which can change the ending you get. Even little things like these curtains blowing in the wind or the lighting during certain scenes came off as kind of impressive for the Nintendo 64. In fact, I just think this game looks pretty nice overall. Sure, it's no rocket robot on wheels, but I think it pulls off the aesthetic and atmosphere it's going for very well. There's a lot to like here, and it's a shame it all got so buried underneath this game's blemishes. Something that's kind of cool to me is that I think this game has managed to get better with time, and that's for one big reason: save states. A lot of deaths in this game feel really cheap and undeserved. There's all those instant death pits, some weird crush deaths from moving geometry, fall damage, and don't even get me started on the nitrous carrying segment. One wrong move and it's back to your previous save point, and while they're not uncommon, your last save is usually a bit further back than you'd like. This is probably where a good bit of the contempt for this game started, but we can fix this. We have the technology. If you're not too much of a capital G gamer to do some save scumming, this is one of those games that's dramatically improved by the use of save states. In my playthroughs, I wound up binding save and load to the D-pad, and it really helped to quell the frustrations of those cheap deaths when they were only sending me back by minutes or seconds. They just really helped to smooth over some of the rougher parts of this game in a way that I felt warranted mentioning. It's up to you to decide how often you save state, but let's just think of that as a sort of choose-your-own difficulty feature. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Castlevania 64 is some kind of hidden gem or a must-play on the system. If I had to rank this game, it'd probably be somewhere in the lower mid-tier. It's far from so bad it's good territory, but if there's one word I'd use to describe this game, it's novel. This is one for fans of the Castlevania series, fans of the Nintendo 64 and its general vibe, or players who enjoy exploring these older, somewhat less polished 3D games. Be prepared to look up a guide for one or two of the more cryptic parts, but don't let the reputation alone put you off of this one.